I watched Encanto this past weekend. I know I'm a little late because a lot of you have probably already watched it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Ah, it's difficult to watch, and I know that there's more I can absorb from it watching it again. And I've seen some posts about what it has meant to a lot of people who have watched it. And what I'm beginning to understand is exactly what the story is is a metaphor for. It's a metaphor for how we as parents, we spend the first 18 years of our lives like everyone else growing up, right? And then we might spend a few years as a single person, and then we marry and spend the next 18 years raising our children. And during that time that we're raising our children, we're kind of raising ourselves. We're kind of continuing to develop who we are as people and overcoming whatever it is that we had to overcome from our own childhood. And then because most of us go into parenting without really as much self-awareness as we get later in life, we become very different people as grandparents than we were as parents, perhaps. And so looking at our life story from that kind of bigger perspective is what Encanto is really about. I'm Melody Brooke. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm an actor and a screenwriter. And more than any of that, of course, I'm a child and I'm a parent. My parents are both gone, and my stepdad is still here. But m- at my point in time, at this point in my life, I certainly have a lot different perspective on my life than I did when I was a kid. I mean, when we're kids, we just look at the world from our own very egocentric point of view, where we're really just focused on what we're needing to grow up. And sometimes we don't get that. In fact, a lot of times I suppose that we don't get what we fully need to prepare ourselves to be the fully present, fully functioning adults that we need to be when we have our own children. Now, I do know that today, I think a lot of young people are postponing their parenting, which is, I think, really wise. None of my children started until they were around 30 or after 30. And so they were more grown up by a long shot than I was when I started at 24. And yet, culturally, depending on, your age group, like in my age group, that was rather, on the older side to start having children. Yeah, hard to believe by today's standards, isn't it? So what I'm looking at is the difficulty that some of us have being able to look on our family history and look on our experience as a child. And some of it was really very unpleasant because our parents weren't prepared to be parents properly. They themselves were broken when they started having children. And then, they passed that on, which is what, coming back to Encanto, that's what Encanto is about. Encanto is really about looking at how our grandparents, maybe even our grandparents' parents, affected the way we were raised and the impact that had on our personal lives and how we perceive our own value as human beings and how we view everything that we've experienced in our life. And all of those things, they're tied together. I mean, if you look at it, World War II was my mom's grandparents' family. My grandparents, they went through the Depression. They went through all of the effects of World War II. And that formed who they were and how they parented and how they thought about themselves and their lives and their ability to stay present in their bodies when life was pretty overwhelmingly difficult due to societal and political things that were happening in the world at the time, right? So here we are. My grandparents went through that. My mom, lived with the direct result of that. And then she passed on that impact to me, which of course I know that I passed on to my children because I was so young and so unprepared for what it was to fully be able to be the parent that in retrospect I can see that I would have wanted very much to have offered my children. So part of what Encanto teaches us is not just to have empathy for what our parents went through and how difficult their lives might have been and how that might have affected us and how we were brought up and the influences and pressures that they might have experienced that then got passed on to us. But it's also having some empathy for how those things impacted us in our ability to parent and be present for our children as they were growing up. I was just talking with a client about this and how, it's so easy in retrospect to judge ourselves and to judge our parents for what they did and how they impacted us, when if we have a little bit more open heart and we come from a place of a little bit more ownership of recognizing that we are imperfect human beings, we all are, and that we only really do the best we can with what we've been given. And then at whatever point, as Oprah says, we learn better, we do better. And then we can become more present for our children and be more available to help our children work through whatever traumas that we might have been complicit in or even actively participated in as they were growing up. That takes a tremendous amount of strength and courage and faith in ourselves and our children to allow ourselves to be that open, because it means taking ownership of something that breaks our heart to even know was true. And that is such a painful process. I mean, it's something that I've had to go through with my children. When I was young, I can look back and realize and understand now why I made the choices that I made and why I made the wrong choices that caused my children to experience things that I would rather have protected them from. But I also know that I absolutely did the best I could given what I got. So our job as a parent raising our children to adulthood is to be able to stand back, let go, let them have their anger, let them have their frustration, let them have their pain and their trauma that it's their job to work through. It's not our job to work through it for them, even though I certainly would love to be able to do that for my children. I know that I have to let go and let them live their own life and let them work through their own stuff and be present as much as possible for them to share with me what their experience is and to be available to help them process it if necessary, or to stand back and just let them be on their own if that's what they need to do, and be that sort of supportive platform to help them, lift them up, to be the parents that they want to be and that I want them to be for my grandchildren and future generations. That's really the whole bottom line message of Encanto, is to be willing to explore all of that, to recognize all of that, and to begin to shift how we experience both blame and shame, and how we experience and understand the things that influenced us and how we became who we were as parents and now who we are as older adults. So I invite you to have the courage to do that. And I know it's not easy. And if it's something you just can't do, well, maybe reach out, get some support, find some support in your church, in your community, or with a therapist, so that you can begin to hold that awareness, process through your own griefs and your own traumas, and be able to be available for your own children and for yourself in an entirely new way than maybe you have in the past. And I do know what a challenge it is. And I'm continuing to face that challenge myself. My children are now having children of their own and seeing all of that and seeing how it affects them and seeing how they're having to learn to make sense of it all for themselves, and doing my best to be present and not, trying to force my points of view on them, but to allow them to develop as they need to develop. Always a scary thing to do as a parent, as I'm sure those of you who are parents know. Um, but it also gives me so much empathy for what crazy stuff my grandmother went through, my grandfather went through, my mom went through, what my father must have gone through to have done the things that they did that were so damaging to future generations without their having any clue that that's what they were doing, because they were just trying to survive the best they could given what they got. So that is the empathy that I want you to have for yourself, for your children, and for past generations, so that you can begin to do the work of healing and making it be different for yourself and future generations. That's the beauty of Encanto. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it. Let me know what you think about it. And I'm here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, just to talk about various things. And if there's anything in particular that you would like to talk about or have questions about, just you can message me, you can leave a comment below, whatever you need to do, because I would love to participate more with you if you would like to throw some stuff out for me to talk about. So I'm going to see who's here. Hi, Gary. Thank you so much for being there, and thanks for your comment. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday.